Hey, Sonetta, I got a question for you. Won't you tell me why it is that the world of academia, intellectual circles, respected scientists, reputable theologians, and world-renowned thinkers and philosophers, innovators, leaders in their field, people that are actually in the labs, on the ground, in the classrooms, figuring out ways to beat diseases, advance medicine and technology, etc., why do they not have anything like the House of Consciousness?
Peace, family. Peace. I am always pleased to be before the Sonetta TV studios, Black News 102 family. I have heard Sonetta say that he has one of the smartest chat rooms on YouTube. And for those of you who are watching this, I'm sure you've looked at other channels. I'm sure you looked at other chat rooms. I'm sure you looked at other comments. And I really feel very honored to stand and talk before you. Because the overwhelming majority of the people that watch this channel and comment are really trying to understand who they are, who we were, and what we're capable of doing. And so that's a powerful place to be, particularly when you are a group of people that have been maligned. You are a group of people who have been spread across the planet. We are at a point where we are about to resurrect over 1 billion people in the world worldwide. These ancient dark masses are about to get to a point where we make global movements. And I would like to humbly say that our brother Sonetta has played a role. I often say to him, and you might have heard me say this on camera, I'm not even sure if he's aware of how big his contribution is. It's a big contribution. So I'm honored to speak to you because I know that I'm all over, whenever I'm traveling all over the country, people say they've seen me on Sonetta TV. So I know that this is a broad discussion. So today what I want to do is I want to start a real important dialogue around an issue that is on the minds of every person of African descent and the minds of people who are not of African descent. In recent weeks, perhaps more than recent years, we have heard people say things about a topic, and the things that they have said have been so thoroughly ahistorical, so completely ridiculous, that in the entire community of people of African descent have been in uproar. And in fact, some of those comments have been so ridiculous that even people who are not of African descent were like, what is going on? That's crazy. You know what I'm talking about, family. Today's lecture, today's class is called The Truth About Slavery, Destroying the Lies and Resurrecting Our Ancestors. So I intend this to be a 3-part class on slavery. Now, I know that some of you immediately are saying one of two things. First, you're saying, do we have to talk about this again? Aren't there things going on in our neighborhoods, in our communities, that are so important that we shouldn't talk about the past? Family, I want you to really hear me when I say that the history is how you get to your present. And your understanding of your history impacts how you behave in your present. And how you behave in your present, which is completely predicated on what has happened in your history, is how you decide, how you hew, how you whittle away into your future. So there is no way for us to continue to try not to speak about this period in our history and somehow find our ways into power. Those two things can't happen. We have to understand what happened. And by understanding what happened, we need to understand what we should be doing right now. And by understanding what we should do right now, that is the only way that we'll be able to move forward into a powerful, powerful future. So yes, let's get into this conversation. And I'm going to talk about some things that actually are uncomfortable. That's what I'm going to do. And hopefully, as I talk about those things that are uncomfortable, we're really going to be able to open a dialogue. I'm going to talk about things like what happened to our African relatives on the continent. Did they betray us and sell us away? How come they didn't come for us? We're going to talk about things like, well, what does it mean that many of us have European heritage, European DNA within us? This is a powerful topic we don't like to talk about. And as someone who just recently has begun to do some DNA research, I'm going to tell you that this is an important topic. So we're going to talk about a rape during enslavement. We're going to talk about what role our African relatives played in our enslavement. We're going to talk about who has benefited from our enslavement. We're going to talk about all these topics because hopefully with the thorough understanding, we'll be able to move forward. So, first of all, let me say to you that I love this painting. This painting shows an African family. At least we see an African man and an African woman. By the way, this is actually not Nat Turner. It is called, and I'm forgetting the name, it's called something like Fighting Slave or something like that. Mm-hmm. And so it should be believed that this is this man's wife. Right. By the way, look at how brave he is to take this axe against these rabid dogs. Notice that he's taken one of them out. Do you see the one laying on the ground, sir? Right. Yeah. He took one of them out. Look at how his queen is expecting her to protect him. Notice the difference in her complexion to his. Right. There's even a commentary being made, a painful commentary being made. So in some ways, we want to be men and protect our families, but there was a period in our history where we were truly not able to protect our families in the way that we wanted to. And that pain is still with us in the present. So I want us to begin to talk about it, because I think that as we talk about it, we're going to be able to do something about it. So let's move. And so as I look at this and you're saying, wasn't slavery a long time ago? Why talk about it now? Look at these celebrities. Look at these folks who have a bigger platform than Brother Sonetta and Brother Jabari. And let's think about some of the things that they've said recently that may attest to their very strong feelings about enslavement, and in other instances, a real lack of understanding of our enslavement. On the left, you know we have to talk about this, brother. Now listen, Kanye has said a lot of things. A lot of things that are provocative, a lot of things that are controversial, a lot of things that have really gotten people either upset or have gotten people to really have some sort of visceral emotional response. But nothing that he has said over the years that he has been in public eye has gotten more people to respond than what he said about our enslavement. When you see CNN, the New York Times, and in New York One, all of these major platforms talking about a comment that a dude made about his own people, you know that this is a big deal. There are very few celebrities that didn't also have a commentary on it. So we're going to talk about what he said. Do you know who the person in the middle is, Sa?
No.
This person is Cynthia Nixon. Cynthia Nixon was one of the stars of Sex and the City, that HBO series that actually also was a film franchise. I know they had at least 2 movies, and I'm sure that they'll think to reboot it at some point because Sex and the City was such a moneymaker for HBO, and so many women really, really enjoyed watching it. I remember when the first movie came out, you would think that it was a black movie. You go over to Magic Johnson Theater, there was groups of women going to see it together. Almost as many sisters went to see that first movie as went to see Girls Trip. So Sex and the City was very popular. But I'm not talking about Cynthia Nixon because of Sex and the City. Cynthia Nixon has decided to actually contend for the governorship of New York State. And so she is competing with Mario Cuomo for the Democratic nomination. Now, Mario Cuomo is actually I'm sorry, not Mario Cuomo. Andrew Cuomo Mario was his father. Andrew Cuomo, who was also governor, by the way. Andrew Cuomo is actually a very powerful governor. He's a governor of one of the most powerful, most noted, most populous states in the Union. So populous that it is not unusual to see the governor of New York travel all around the world talking about New York. Some people say that Andrew Cuomo and New York State has done more in Puerto Rico than the United States government itself. That's how influential the governor of New York is. And there have been several governors, several? I know there's been at least one governor of New York State that has also been president. So it's clear that Andrew Cuomo is considering that. But now we have this woman who was an actor who is contending and attacking him from the left. So she said some things that a lot of people, downtrodden people worldwide, at least downtrodden people in New York State, have really responded to.
And what was that?
She's talked about the problem with incarceration. She's discussed the difficulty that we have with policing in Black and Latino communities. She's even talked about the problems that we have with people that have criminal records in Black and Latino communities and how it's affected our community. She's talked about really important things. And then she started talking about the legalization of marijuana. Really powerful. I know a lot of people in the hood that were responding to her. And then she said the wrong thing.
Oh, man.
What did she say? She said we had to fight for the legalization of marijuana because for Black and brown communities, it was a form of reparations.
Oh, man.
So legalizing marijuana is reparations for our enslavement?
Wow. She said that.
She said that.
I'm going to go get that and put
you got to.
Can you know where it's at?
I'm going to show you part of it.
Okay.
Right? I don't know if it's actually, I don't think there's actually video of it.
Oh.
But certainly it was reported. And everybody had to attack her on that. The same people in the Black community, the Latino community, the progressive community that were behind her, they said, whoa.
She done messed up.
She really messed up. Mm-hmm. And so recently, I think last week, she was asked about it again. And she said, I will not use that word again. She didn't even say the word reparations. I will not use that word again. It speaks to her misunderstanding of the legacy and the history and the meaning of enslavement.
Right, because by her saying something like that, it's like all Black people smoke marijuana.
But even then, even if she was able to give Black and brown people, Black and Latino people, licenses to actually sell marijuana if it was legalized, how in the world does that deal with nearly 500 years of kidnapping, murder, rape, and coerced labor? How does that address that?
It don't.
So this is a real problem. And then finally, we see our brother Snoop Dogg. I'm going to tell you more about what is going on with Snoop Dogg in a minute. So first of all, this is Cynthia Nixon. And here's the article in Vox. This is a good one. Listen, look at the title. It says, Cynthia Nixon called marijuana licenses a form of reparations for Black people. Period. Not exactly. Get the snark in their title. They're like, yo, how is that a form of reparations? Vox is not a media outlet that's owned by Black folk, not owned by people of African descent. But even they recognize how ridiculous this was.
Yeah.
And so she needs to be schooled on what our enslavement meant. And shortly after that, we saw this brother go on TMZ, and honestly, when I look at the video, people have been saying this for a long time. I really believe that Kanye has some mental challenges that he's confronting. And the challenge with the condition that he may have, perhaps it's bipolar disorder. The challenge that with people that have those sorts of conditions is that the same medication that helps them be even keel is the same thing that prevents them from being as prolific and as artistic. So it's a real challenge. It's a real challenge for him. And so let's look at a brief section of what he said.
Is no stranger to controversy, but his latest comment on the topic of slavery may be causing the biggest furor yet. Stephanie Skandaris is on the story. So, Stephanie, what exactly did Kanye say?
Okay, Andrew, this whole thing came up in the middle of Kanye West's interview with the TMZ show yesterday. He started talking about free thought, he talked about his politics, and then he made these very controversial comments about slavery. Want to get right to the video to show you? Have a look.
You hear about slavery for 400 years? For 400 years, that sounds like a choice. Like, you was there for 400 years and it's all of y'all? You know, like, it's like we're mentally in prison. I like the word prison because slavery goes too direct to the idea of blacks. It's like slavery, Holocaust Jews, slavery is blacks.
Now, the backlash to that started immediately when TMZ staffer and podcaster Van Lathan stood up and confronted Kanye West. Have a look at that.
The rest of us in society have to deal with these threats to our lives. We have to deal with the marginalization that has come from the 400 years of slavery that you said for our people was a choice. Frankly, I'm disappointed, I'm appalled, and brother, I am unbelievably hurt by the fact that you have morphed into something, to me, that's not real.
Now, since then, Kanye West has released a flurry of tweets. Here is just some of what he said. He said, "Of course I know that slaves did not get shackled and put on a boat by free will. My point is for us to have stayed in that position, even though the numbers were on our side, means we were mentally enslaved." He also said, Andrew, his statement was an example of free thought, that it was just an idea, and that now he's being attacked for presenting new ideas.
And obviously people are just not responding well to the comments, and it's led to a firestorm of criticism on social media.
That's right. So first we have the fans, a lot of them saying they're disappointed. People are also mocking the comments with the hashtag "if slavery was a choice," that is trending. Then there are the other artists. Director Spike Lee wrote a long post on Instagram saying Kanye West needs to wake up. Part of what Spike Lee wrote is, "Our ancestors did not choose to be stolen from Mother Africa. Our ancestors did not choose to be ripped of our religion, language, culture." Musician will.i.am also tweeting and speaking about this, saying the comments broke his heart. He also says he hopes this isn't to raise awareness about Kanye West's upcoming releases. Kanye West, we know, has new albums coming out, a new seasons for his clothing line, his sneakers. A lot of people suspecting this is all some kind of marketing scheme, although of course we know Kanye West is known for being provocative. Whatever the motivation, some people are showing him support. Here is rapper The Game tweeting this: "Kanye's a genius. People who have never achieved greatness are not allowed to question it." Andrew.
All right, Stephanie, thank you. The CBC's Stephanie Skandaris.
Now, the reason why I played this particular video, instead of even playing TMZ, because I want you to recognize that this is a report on Canada's national news, Canada's broadcasting channel, CBC. This is such a big story that the Tom Who, that Europeans in another country are devoting time to it. So let me ask you this. If you have a child, let's not even go to a child. You have your wife, and you beat your wife every day, and you tell her, if you leave this house, I'm going to beat you even worse. I'm going to kill you. And your wife is so traumatized that she does not leave. Does that mean now that it is her choice not to leave?
No.
So even if he was attempting to say that the mental aspect of our enslavement was very damaging and a real serious part of this,
Now, that was a
then how in the world would you say it's a choice?
Now, that was a good point.
Because what it does is it once again puts the onus on the person who is being dehumanized. That's what he did. He could try to clean up all he wants. But that's not what you said, Kanye. That's not what you said, dude. And then he wants to say that he actually was exhibiting free choice and free will and free thinking. You know what? One of our greatest scholars said something to me when I was a young man. He asked me and a few other students what we thought about a particular topic. And I'm going to be really honest. The other students had done some reading. But Jabari hadn't done the reading. So when he got to Jabari kind of just gave my ideas. And he asked me once or twice, well, what do you think about this? And I said, oh, I'm not familiar with that. What do you think about this? Well, I'm aware of it, but I need to do more reading on it. And he said to me, this is Dr. John Henry Clark, by the way, one of our greatest scholars. He said to me, by the way, my name was Corwin. So he said, Corwin, what are you basing your ideas on? What are you basing your argument, your position on? And I said, well, this is my opinion. Do you know what he said to me, Sa? He said, son, you have to earn an opinion. We have gotten the idea that opinions are something that everyone can have. But if we do that, what we've done is we've taken out the element of deep thought. We've taken out the element of an analysis of all the facts before you have an opinion. We've taken out the concept that some people have prepared their minds better to actually have to articulate a position. I could give you an opinion on whether there's water on Mars. But are you telling me that my opinion is equal to a scientist who has studied the atmosphere and the geology of Mars?
Oh, no.
I could say, well, it's my opinion. Everybody has an opinion.
Right.
This is not about whether you have an opinion. This is about whether you have earned the right to have an opinion. Kanye even says that he does not read. He almost feels like this is like something he should be proud of, like he's just able to think. Kanye has taken this concept that he's a genius and it's gone to his head. I think anyone can acknowledge that Kanye is a masterful musician. But that doesn't mean that you should then talk about history and that we should listen to you. What made him do that? He really needs some assistance. And I'm going to tell you that as many people who are really attacking him, I actually feel sorry for him, because looking at the way he behaved in that newsroom at TMZ, I really think that he already mentioned that he's not taking the medication that he's been given. Now, I don't know what medication it was, but his behavior seemed like it was off kilter, like something was askew. And when you're dealing with that, I don't know if you should be in public spewing your ideas freely. Because you know what? If and when he gets this under control, he's going to be very embarrassed by his behavior, just as we all were. So Kanye, Anika actually said to me, my queen said to me, that this lecture should be called A Letter to Kanye. That's the subtitle, A Letter to Kanye, because he needs to hear this. And then finally, what about Snoop Dogg? Snoop Dogg had a very, very visceral response to Kanye. Had you heard his response? No. This is what he said on Instagram.
Hey, my nigga, what time you clocking in for slavery today? 4 o'clock? Shit, I think I'm gonna be there about 8, maybe 9. I don't know what time we supposed to be there. Oh, we can go whenever we want? Okay, that's cool. So you really think niggas sat around and did that, you dumb motherfucker? You need some help, cuz, for real. No jokes aside. Whoever in that house with that nigga need to get him some fucking help. Psychiatric treatment. Not no fucking pills and opiums and all that goofy shit he been on. Maybe some working out, fruits, water, juice, and some black women. For starters. Some real black women. To cuss his ignorant ass out. Goofy ass women around him.
He had a really, really visceral response. I'm not even sure, and you better be sure that they've either met each other or they're going to spend time together. I'm not even sure how their relationship can be repaired after you take such a strong stance. So he really had some really clear opinions. But I must say to you, family, if you've been following Jabari Osaze, you should know that I got at Snoop Dogg just a few years ago. Mm-hmm. Because he said some stuff about enslavement, about slavery, that I thought was ill-advised. I thought that he wasn't aware of what the history was. So this is what he said just about 3 years ago. Actually, it was 2 years ago.
No disrespect, but I can't watch no motherfucking more black movies where niggas getting dogged out, 12 years a slave, Roots, Underground. I can't watch none of that shit. I'm sick of this shit. How the fuck they gonna put Roots on Memorial Day? They gonna just keep beating that shit in our heads or how they did us, huh? I mean, I don't understand America. They just want to just keep showing the abuse that we took hundreds and hundreds of years ago. But guess what? We taking the same abuse. Think about that part. When y'all gonna make a motherfucking series about the success that black folks is having? The only success we have is Roots and 12 years a slave and shit like that, huh? Fuck y'all, I ain't watching that shit. And I advise you motherfuckers that's real niggas like myself, fuck them television shows. Let's create our own shit based on the day. How we live and how we inspire people today. Black is what's real. Fuck that old shit. Right, Jules?
Now, I think you need to understand something. First of all, Roots was a series actually, that was based on a book written by an African-American man. 12 Years a Slave is also based on a book that was written by an African-American man. A man that this actually happened to, is its life. And it was directed by a black director and did very well. And Underground was a series that actually was written, produced by black folks. So I think that he, first of all, has to recognize that these are our stories. Black people did that. I almost feel sorry for Snoop because he doesn't understand the context of our enslavement. All he feels is the victimization. All he feels is the pain. And I'm not saying that our enslavement was not painful. But what I want you to understand is we have been understanding this story incorrectly. And I'm going to even show you how that happened and why. We have to take control of our own story and understand what actually happened. While Snoop is absolutely correct to get at Kanye, I still think that he even needs to be instructed on the actual history of the enslavement of African people. So let's go further. What do these misunderstandings tell us about the existing narrative about our enslavement? First of all, our understanding of our enslavement has only allowed us to see ourselves as victims and subjugated people. That's the one problem with it. And then we often focus on Africans who were involved in our enslavement, but we seldom focus on the institutions, the nations, and the people who created the institution of slavery and received the majority of its spoils. We rarely focus on them. And if you are disagreeing with that, why don't you name one institution that is in existence that benefited from the enslavement of African people? I'm not talking about something general. Name a business, an actual business that exists. In our second class on this series, I'm going to give you several of them. And you may be surprised to hear that you are still patroning some of them, yet they have done very little to make amends for what occurred. Very, very little. And then we are almost completely unaware of the heroic nature of our victory over the most powerful global system of inhumane treatment in the world. That's not how we understand the story. We don't think of the story as look at what was happening to us and look at how the people with the least power, the people that have been most subjugated, destroyed the most powerful first global system. How did those people who were the least powerful destroy the most powerful global system in the world? We don't think of it that way, and there's a very clear reason. The reason why we don't think of it that way is because what we know about our enslavement is a lie created by our oppressors. So, for those of you who have actually seen me do this presentation on my book, 7 Little White Lies, you may be somewhat familiar with some of this. I ask, what are the effects of a lie? because a lie can affect millions, billions of people across generations. And there's another part of this. A physical injury usually has a time frame for healing.
Right.
So that when you break your arm, the doctor puts a cast on, even today an ear cast sometimes, and they say, come back in this number of weeks. And when you take off the cast, they don't say, oops, this is too soon.
Right.
We should have given you another 2 weeks. Because there's a real clear time frame on how quickly, what is the period by which this healing should occur. But with a lie, first of all, their effect, their psychological, emotional, spiritual effect is not as easily delineated, not as easily visible as a physical injury. And we have no idea how long it can affect people. So here are some more questions. Can a lie be more lasting than broken bones? Of course it can. There have been many things that have been said about people of African descent. And those things have been the vilest things that humans have ever said about other people. And you have to ask yourself, with all these mistruths that have been actually broadcasted, that have actually been reinforced about people of African descent, how has it affected us? So take a look at this picture. This is from a comic, and it says, Uncle Tom, would you like to be back in Kentucky with your family? And Uncle Tom, holding this little white girl, says, I would, little Eva, but I can't. By the way, look at him. He's smiling. Who the heck would smile because they've been taken away from their family? This is Uncle Tom, right?
But the original Uncle Tom is not what they told us.
You know we're going there.
Oh, okay.
You know we're going there. So take a look at this. Who is this?
Oh, man. You already know. The judge, right?
This is Clarence Thomas and his wife, by the way.
Wow.
That's his wife. That's his wife.
What the?
Almost look like little Eva grown up, right? Almost look like little Eva grown up, right?
Yeah.
So Clarence, some people call him Clarence Thomas.
Yeah.
So this is Clarence Thomas, the Supreme Court Justice. And we know that he has gone out of his way to do almost anything that can be harmful to people of African descent. So people often say that he's not Judge Thomas, he's Judge Uncle Thomas or Uncle Judge Thomas because of how thoroughly he attempts to destroy his Africanness and by extension the benefit that any African can receive from any decision that comes before the Supreme Court. And then, who's this? You know who that is?
Oh, man. You already know. Uncle Ruckus.
Uncle Ruckus from the Boondocks.
Now, you know they got a real Uncle Ruckus here. I think, you know what, Jabari? I think they took that character from Pastor David Manning.
Woo! Oh, no!
You look at Pastor Manning. Woo! It's the same character, brother.
Uncle Ruckus.
Uncle Ruckus.
Listen, Sonetta.
And I'm surprised James might say, you know what? I'm suing y'all, man.
You mentioned two people. You mentioned Dane Calloway with his thorough argument that Africans are not Africans, that people in the United States are not Africans. We're actually the Aboriginal people of this land. And you've also mentioned Pastor David Manning of Atla.
Right.
Church. Both of those people I would love to be able to have in front of a camera and a microphone.
Get you
listen.
with Pastor
Yeah. I want to debate that guy.
Bro, I can make that happen, Jabari.
Listen.
I interviewed him one time.
I remember I saw the video. When I saw it, I shot you a text like, yo, what's up? So these are people that I want to be able to confront. Please.
Yeah.
So this is Uncle Ruckus, and we often say Uncle Ruckus is Uncle Tom.
Right.
In fact, when I was a kid, I actually also remember this cartoon. This is something I saw when I was a child. Take a look at it.
How come you wasn't blowed up on that powder keg?
Why, that was nothing. That sweat pouring off me just naturally put that fuse out. Then Legree come at me with that machine gun.
But Uncle Tom, didn't them bullets kill
So what is that supposed to be saying? So this cartoon, which was made by Tex Avery, by the way, who was a very popular director for Warner Brothers at one point. When you look at this cartoon, this is actually supposed to be a parody of Uncle Tom's Cabin, of this book. So what are we actually saying? You could even see in the cartoon that the narrative that is being told is that Uncle Tom is a liar of the first order. That Uncle Tom says things to his own people that are absolutely incorrect, that are absolutely untrue, and he actually is prone to telling tall tales. Why is that the narrative that people have? And it's very interesting that when I do this part of my lecture on my book in front of audiences, and I've done it in front of quite a few audiences, I ask them if they ever read Uncle Tom's Cabin. And many of them raise their hand. And I ask them to tell me what Uncle Tom's Cabin is about, and they cannot remember. What do they remember? They remember the concept that an Uncle Tom is a sellout.
Right.
That an Uncle Tom is a race traitor. That an Uncle Tom is trying to destroy their community. When in actuality, Uncle Tom's Cabin, written by a Tomhoo woman, a white woman, Harriet Beecher Stowe, was actually about the life, based on the life, of the man on the left.
That couldn't be broken.
Sonetta, do you remember his name?
No, but he couldn't be broken.
This brother is Josiah Henson. And it's so painful to me that we're more familiar with Taraji P. Henson than we are of Josiah Henson.
Oh, man.
By the way, this is her great uncle. She is related to this man. So if he is actually the man who Uncle Tom is based on, was Josiah Henson and Uncle Tom. And in fact, was Uncle Tom in the book Uncle Tom's Cabin and Uncle Tom. Harriet Beecher Stowe, a Tomhoo woman, wrote this book to dramatize the inhumanity of enslavement for her own people. She wanted other fellow Europeans, fellow whites, to see how painful, how inhumane, how immoral the system of enslavement was. That was her goal. She didn't write a caricature. And if we actually look at the life of Josiah Henson, we see a man who was enslaved in Kentucky, has 3 children and a wife, and this man at one point was beaten so mercilessly that for the rest of his life, he barely had any control of his right arm. That's how mercilessly he was beaten. And it was a point where he was, even during enslavement, trying to stack his dollars so that he'd be able to purchase his family. And what happens? After the enslaver takes his money, he goes, oh no, that's not the price we agreed on. We agreed on double that. So he began to understand that there was no rule that the Tomhoo was willing to abide by.
Now, what is the Tomhoo?
The Tomhoo.
I know what it is.
But the Tomhoo, I usually use both Tomhoo, European, and white, so that people who are unfamiliar with me. The Tomhoo is the name that the ancient Kemetic people gave to the people that we would consider white people or Europeans today. In fact, Tomhoo is the first name that we're aware of for the European. I don't like to use the word European because it's based on the concept that Europe is a continent. Now, I know in school you have been told what a continent is. Now, I want you to go and Google a map of the world and say, if this is Europe, how is it a continent? So Europeans, the Tomhoo, have told you the rules for what a continent is, and then in their own homeland they violate those rules. If they are lucky, they should be called Eurasians. And I say lucky because in actuality, Asia is larger than what is considered Europe. So in many ways, they are subordinate to that entire landmass. So to call them European gives their area of the world greater prominence than it should be given. To call them white, in actuality, those people are not really white. These are colors, right? I would prefer to use the name that the African gave to them.
The Talmud.
The Tomhu.
The Talmud.
And you want to hear something else interesting? We also described Europe. Europe is actually a semi-mythological queen from Carthage. Where is Carthage? Carthage is in northern Africa. That semi-mythological queen's name was Europa. So even Europe is based on the name of your African mother. We gave them all their names. But they chose that one because it gives them more prominence. And so I say to you, family, that I use the word Tomhu because that's the original name we gave to them. That name recognizes that we are the oldest people on the planet. And is it not correct for parents to name their children? Well, they are our children. Wayward children, but still our children. And we need to now reassert ourselves as the elders of humanity, the progenitors of human civilization. So that is the reason why I use the word Tomhu. So let's continue with Josiah Henson. Josiah Henson realizes that the Tomhu enslaver, the white European enslaver, even though they've agreed upon a price, a number for him to be able to purchase himself and his family out of enslavement, he realizes that the only person that can attest to that price is the same person who owns him. He's not willing to abide by any rules, any laws, any agreement. How can you have a gentleman's agreement with someone who is not a gentleman? So he devises a plan to escape. And not escape by himself, escape with his entire family. He travels thousands of miles all the way into Canada. And one of his children is so young that he has to travel with that child the entire route on his back. Can you imagine escaping thousands of miles to Canada with your family on your back, hiding? When he got to Canada, it says that he kissed the ground. And so you would think that a man who was an Uncle Tom, according to what we've been told an Uncle Tom is, would actually be happy with the enslaver. But instead, we see someone that has the kind of intestinal fortitude rarely displayed by humans. When he gets to Canada, he doesn't do things that are against his people, like what we believe in Uncle Tom actually is. He actually builds an autonomous community of Africans who have escaped enslavement. Because he wants people to know that if they take the journey he did, there will be someone on the other end that will continue to teach them skills, that will actually have an incredible school. His community was called the Dawn Community. And it was so powerful. The school was so amazing that after a few years, the white Canadians, the Tomhu Canadians, would send their children to the school that was created by recently enslaved Africans. And they had actually begun to have a mill, and they were working on woodcrafts and farming, and that community, part of it is still there. I have the honor with the African Genesis Institute to visit the area where Josiah Henson went to visit his home. Powerful. Powerful. Uncle Tom is not an Uncle Tom. Uncle Tom was a revolutionary African who fought against the world's greatest odds and didn't just take those benefits for himself. He understood the fundamental principle that enslaved Africans understood. I am not free unless we are free. Why Uncle Tom should be on every school. His image should be in every home. This brother is emblematic of the best of what Africans can do and who Africans are. And so how did we get this idea of who Uncle Tom was? That's divorced from the history of the real person, Josiah Henson, and the person who was...
How do you spell Tomhu?
Tomhu is usually spelled, and keep in mind that it is a word in the Kemetic language, so I'm giving you an approximation of it in the English language. I usually spell it Tamhou, Tom who?
T-A-M-H-O-U.
You will see some scholars, one of the scholars that use this name regularly was our great ancestor and great warrior scholar, Sheikh Anta Diop.
Wow.
He might have said, listen, that's because we're not reading enough of Sheikh Anta Diop. That's why. That's why. I remember Brother Shaka, when he heard me say it, he said, you've been reading that Diop, ain't you? Because Brother Shaka does read Diop.
Yeah, Shaka read.
Yes, he does. Yes, he does. So he's the only person that when I said it, acknowledged one of the people that it came from. So, you know, while he and I had a little tussle, the reality is that's my brother and I respect his scholarship. So look at how this story of an African has been malshapened. Why was it malshapened? Why was it manipulated? Well, the enslaver, the Tomhus that were in control of our bodies, our families, who continue to enslave us, realized that if this story of Uncle Tom's Cabin, written by Harriet Beecher Stowe, got out to the African people, it would inspire them to leave, perhaps even to go to the Dawn settlement. So what they did, because at this point in the history of the United States, copyright rules are almost non-existent, they simply took minstrel characters, white people, Tomhu people in blackface, and they would create these plays, these minstrel shows, where they would create an Uncle Tom that was someone who was violent to his own people, someone who was a great liar. That's what the cartoon you saw was. With that fat, supposed Uncle Tom talking to that child who clearly could tell he was lying. What they were trying to do is say, he's a great liar. So in effect, what they were saying was, you're nothing but a slave. And you can never be free. You can never do heroic things for your family. You can never free yourself from our grasp. So when we continue to use the word Uncle Tom, and in fact, it is the folks that we call the quote-unquote conscious community that use the word more than almost anyone else. What we are doing is we are maligning the good name of one of our most powerful ancestors. It must stop. We have to stop using the term Uncle Tom. Because we are actually damaging the name, the good name of an ancestor.
Let me explain something to you.
We are actually saying something very negative about Josiah Henson.
That's all we was talking about.
We are actually misrepresenting the very book, Uncle Tom's Cabin. I know people that don't want to read it because they've heard of what Uncle Tom is. Can you believe that 150 years after enslavement in the United States ended, we still don't understand that this book was about how dangerous and how damaging and how evil our enslavement was? To this day, we won't read about the story of a great African man because of the lie that was told to us. So you better believe that a lie is more dangerous than a physical injury. You'd better understand that a lie has a great effect on how people behave. And so this is why we must talk about this topic, the truth about slavery, because we have to have a proper perspective of what happened, how we behaved, and how we destroyed the system. If we understood it, it would empower us. Let's move on. So these are the important topics that we're going to cover. We're going to talk about what is the transatlantic slave trade? What is it? What does that term mean? We're going to answer the question that I often get asked, why didn't we fight? You mean with all of these people? How come we didn't just fight and win? That's the question, that's the comment that Kanye is trying to respond to. Of course, he hasn't read anything. He just has his own opinion that's based on what? If someone asked him, you said all of us compared to them, well, how many enslaved people were here? He would not know that answer. He wouldn't know. Well, who were they going to fight? He wouldn't know. And it's a simple question they could have asked. Well, didn't enslaver have guns? Isn't that almost a great equalizer? Couldn't one person with a gun fight several people without guns? So I want you to, there are so many simple questions that he could have been asked that he would not have been able to answer. Why? Because he hasn't read anything. Kanye, it's important for you to understand this history. Now, I don't believe that Kanye will review this video. But I'm going to say to you, Kanye, I am willing to really help you understand this history in quiet. I'm not going to go and broadcast that. I want to help. Because I know that looking at who you are and looking at your heart, I don't think you were trying to say something negative about your own people. But you did because you don't understand what they did. I would love to be able to play a role to explain the real story to you, to give you the proper context. The third important topic is our African family betrayed us and sold us. This is a topic that we even began to talk about even more with that great movie that came out this year. You know, I'm talking about Black Panther. It was on the lips of virtually everyone that went to see it. And you know that everybody went to see it. What does it mean? Didn't our African family betray us and sell us here? That is an issue that we have to address in this three-part class, this three-part series. The other thing I hear is, are we weak or are we cursed? How did this happen to us? And you know that there are people who actually, and I'm talking in some ways about our Hebrew Israelite brothers, there's some of them, not everybody, but there's some of them that say that the African is cursed based on their understanding of the biblical story, the narrative about the sons of Noah. And so they say the African is cursed, and this is the reason why we were enslaved. That's the argument that they'll make. And so we're going to address the actuality of what happened so that we can have a better understanding of this question, are we weak or cursed? Number 5 is, they took our culture. Did the Tamhu take our culture? What does that mean, they took our culture? We're going to talk about that. In number 6, we're going to say, what about our 40 acres? We're going to talk about where does the concept of 40 acres come from? Where does it come from? What happened to it? Is it still something that we should be working towards? And then finally, who really benefited? And in this one, we're going to talk about some other things that are also painful. We're going to even talk about that term that is used often, miscegenation. We're going to talk about the Tamhu man having their way with the African woman as well. So we're going to talk about that there. Yes.
Know why this is so important? It's because many of us understand and know that we went through slavery, but we don't really understand the depths of it.
Yeah.
We don't understand the effects of it.
That's right.
We know a little bit of it and what it has done. But when you really go deep into it, and that's what you're dealing with now, you're going to deal with solutions, you're going to deal with the effects of it. And this is why this is so very important, where a lot of people, like you heard Snoop don't even want to know about slavery no more.
Because all he's doing, he's responding from the pain is what he's responding from.
He said he don't even want to talk about slavery no more. So therefore, you know he's hiding it from his children.
Oh, yeah.
He ain't talking to anybody. He's discussing with his kids.
No. I know a lot of parents that say we must forget. And I'm going to tell you, there's a really small community in the United States. Very small. And they also went through a great calamity. It pales in the scale of our enslavement. But they don't say we have to forget. They say never forget. Because they recognize that understanding the atrocities that were committed against them helps them to prevent people from having power over them. And I'm talking about the Jewish community.
I know, of course.
Do you know very well, I got to say it because I don't know who's watching, but I also got to say, do you know that the Jewish community will chase after an old, doddering, incontinent man that's someplace in the world that played some role in the Holocaust, and they will bring him to justice. They'll bring him to justice even though virtually all of the institutions of their Holocaust have been damaged, even though they have their own nation carved out of the land of other people. Even though they have the 5th largest standing army, they're a nuclear power. They still go after one guy who cannot even hold his bowels hiding someplace. And you, African, have not gone after those businesses that still exist, that have not given you 1 red cent. You haven't dismantled them. The process of globalism that we are in now began with our enslavement. Yes, Brother Saad.
One of the greatest things that happened to us during the time of slavery is disunited us as a people. In America, we are all discombobulated. We don't know who we are, brother. We Moors, we Hebrews, we Muslims, we Christians, we Seventh-day Adventists, we Five Percenters, we Nation of Islam, we Black Panther, we Freemasons, and we all fighting each other, don't know who we are. We have a big identity crisis, and this is one of the reasons why the European, the Talmud, will not respect reparations for black people, because we don't even, some of us fight with each other talking about, man, what you mean? I'm not a slave. I ain't go through slavery. My ancestors ain't come over here on slave ships. So when you got us fighting each other about that, the European, the Talmud, steps back and say, what the hell we got to give these niggas reparations for? They don't even know who they are. They don't know what we took from them. Hold on. They don't know what we took. They don't even know that the jewelry that they got on their neck comes to them from us. We selling them their own stuff.
That's right.
So why we gonna give these crazy niggas reparations when they don't even know that they deserve reparations? So you got the Moors, you got a group, you got, now we fighting about whether we African or goddamn Aborigine. So the European, the Talmud is sitting back like, these niggas want reparations? Really? They fighting each other. See, that's how the Talmud got their reparations, because they came together in a silent block, brother. They came together as a silent block, like we all want. We want our reparations, and they got it. We fighting each other. So we ain't never getting it.
By the way, and you know, sometimes we need to do this more often. Jabari can be very busy, and we have to talk about actually current events sometimes and put it in perspective. You've heard a lot about Germany leaving the not Germany, I'm sorry, the United Kingdom, the UK leaving the European Union. But you have to understand the European Union, by the way, notice the term European. Once again, it goes back to giving themselves more importance, even though they are connected to the continent of Asia. And Asia takes up the much larger landmass. But the Europeans, the Tamhu, united. Why? Because they actually were fighting and killing each other. They had over 1,000 years of war. The EU, or the European Union, was the mechanism to tie their bundles together, as my mother would say, to make sure that their unified benefit was greater than their disunity. And that's the reason why they actually came out of World War II in a stronger position, because of the European Union. We have to understand that that's just not a term that doesn't affect us. In many ways, it's a model for us to understand that the Tamhu, while they may fight with each other, they will always unify against other racial groups, other ethnic groups. That's what they've done. That's what they've done. So yes, our disunity is a big part of this. And one of the reasons why we're so disunified is actually because of our enslavement. The reasons why it happened in the first place is because we were not unified. I'm going to tell you that there are groups around the world, virtually every group other than the African around the world benefits from the African not being unified. The Chinese benefit from it, the Indians benefit from it, the Japanese benefit from it, and definitely the Tamhu benefits from it. Every group benefits from our disunity. And I'm going to tell you, for those of you who are saying, I'm not an African, you have to understand that that is something that the Tamhu gave to you. Why? Because if you viewed yourself as an African, you would recognize that they are continuing to rape the most opulent landmass in the world that is your birthright. They take in your stuff, and they continue to take your stuff. And after they get it, guess what they do? We're going to talk about this when we talk about the transatlantic slave trade. They take raw materials, they refine it, and then they sell you the final product. They take your stuff and sell it back to you. And then they even fight to artificially inflate the price that you are paying for it. This is what neocolonialism is. I bet you the average African person in the United States doesn't know what the term colonial is and doesn't know what the term neocolonialism is. Well, when we talk about the transatlantic slave trade, you have to understand how it works. Do you know, for example, that the Haitian people Haiti is one of the poorest nations on the planet. Do you know that Haiti was once one of the most opulent places on the planet? That Haiti was at once one of the most wealthy places on the planet. Well, the Haitians sometimes are starving so much that you know what they regularly eat. Do you know what the average poor Haitian regularly eats?
What?
They eat dirt cookies. Cookies that are made from dirt with water. That is a regular part of people's diet in the country of Haiti. Do you know that Haiti actually has the ability to grow lots of rice? Do you know that the IMF and the World Bank prevent them from growing and selling their own rice to their own people?
Damn.
That they have to buy rice from the United States? Did you know that? Do you know that the buying rice from the United States has killed their entire agricultural environment to develop their own rice? Why they could sell rice around the world. These structures are still in existence after our enslavement. And because we don't want to understand the structures that were put in place, we will not be able to get out of these relationships that continue to subjugate us. That the Tom who knows that they don't want you to know that, because you, African, destroyed the entire system. If you knew more, you would not stop. You'd continue to destroy the mechanisms of your enslavement. And African, you can. No other people on the planet are more resilient or more powerful. So you have to not understand what's happening. Because if you don't understand what's happening, you don't know where you should set your fire.
That's not true. And then he says, don't get a non-Haitian to speak on Haiti. Now, this dude supposed to be from Haiti,
I want to say to you,
that's not true.
Family, listen. Sonnet, I'm going to give you the video that describes. Now, you know the reason why he said that? Let me say this first, because I don't want to fight this brother.
Right.
The reason why he said it is because we still are embarrassed about what happens to our people. The only people that should be embarrassed about the Haitians eating dirt cookies are Africans worldwide. Because Haiti is one of the most important nations to Africans worldwide. They are the Africans that destroyed their colonial power and created their own nation. So you're saying don't get a non-Haitian. First of all, how do you know that I'm a non-Haitian?
Go ahead.
How do you know that? Second of all, is it possible that you may be a Haitian and not know that? You know everything about the country of Haiti?
Go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah.
And so what I'm saying to you is don't respond because you're embarrassed, brother. The people that should be embarrassed are all of us. Because after Haiti threw off their colonializers, every African in the world should have said, that is now the global capital of Africa.
That's right.
We're going to make sure that those Africans that taught us that we can do that are the most powerful, the most respected Africans in the world. So I don't want to fight with you.
Another thing is, we're not making fun of you.
No.
Our people, bro. That's what he got. I hope he don't think we trying to make fun of that.
Why would I make fun of it? That's painful to me. And let me say something to you. What I'm going to do, and I'm going to give this to Sonnetter, is I'm going to give you a link to some of the articles and the video that describes the dirt cookies. Because it is a fact that is what's happening. It is a fact that is what's happening. That you go to large markets and you'll actually see this stuff that's supposed to be, it's flour, it's dirt flour. This is because that country that is so powerful and opulent has been broken by the Tomhu, and Africans have turned their back on Haiti. Haiti's condition is our greatest sorrow.
What happened when Mrs. Clinton went over there?
Listen, I'm gonna tell you that even now, the actual head of state that actually had the interest of his people in heart, where the United States worked to actually take him out of power. It was the U.S. that did that. And so we need to make sure that if we understood who we are, we would actually, anyone that was involved in the United States would have actually been dealt a blow. But instead, we just look at it from afar and say, damn, that ain't that a shame? So that's what I want to say to you, brother. I don't want to argue with you about it. Now, if you are trying to say that you're positive that doesn't happen, then show us that it doesn't happen. Because I am prepared to actually take it back. But I want to say to you that that is actually a great sorrow that happens. Can you see the video that I'm playing on YouTube? It's called Haitians Eat Dirt Cookies to Survive. So you need to understand that this is something that is very common. And by the way, there are ailments that occur from eating soil. This is common and it's dangerous. So please, brother, this is not supposed to be an insult. I'm not trying to insult you.
Show me now. Show me now. Not yet. Wait till the people come in. I had to cut it.
Okay.
Because when they call.
Now, this is from National Geographic. It says, poor Haitians resort to eating dirt. That's National Geographic. Here goes, here's this video on the World of Cuisine on YouTube that says, Haitians eat dirt cookies to survive. Listen, this is not hard to find. This is something that happens very regularly. And we have to make sure that it does not happen. Here's NBC News. Haiti's poor resort to eating dirt. It's NBC News. Brother, you're responding from discomfort and embarrassment. I'm more embarrassed than you are. For the fact that we haven't prevented that from happening. I'm more embarrassed than you are. Because we should have stopped this. But this actually talks to how ignorant we are of how painful, what the realities are. That's what this speaks to. And because we continue to be ignorant, we're allowing that to happen. And we have to not allow that to happen. Here's the video.
The recipe passed down for generations here in Haiti. Women spend entire days making them. Grandmothers, daughters, and younger girls, infants.
Listen, I don't know why. So I don't want you to respond from that. The very fact that you're responding that way means that this is an important topic for you. And if you want to talk more about it, JabariOsaze@hotmail.com. Reach out to me. I want to talk to you about it. Okay? Okay.
And Jabari, we got to be out of our minds.
Listen.
We got to be out of our minds, and the effects of slavery got to be haunting us and destroying us.
So instead, that's right.
In order for us to prove that we're out of our mind, who allows, like say me and you was to move to India and we open up shop, or we open up shop in Chinatown and they're going to patronize us. We allow everybody in our community.
That's right.
Whether we are in Atlanta,
that's right.
See it, whether wherever we are in the world, we allow everybody to come into our community and we are happy that they there, but then we get on each other, and tell me if you ain't never see this. We get on each other for trying to make $1 from our own culture. We're not supposed to make $1 with our culture. What do they say? Sarnetta trying to make money. Sarnetta trying to sell them sneakers. Sarnetta trying to sell DVDs. Oh, that brother trying to get money. He only want money. Meanwhile, you got the Chinese store right there on the corner. You got the liquor store there. You got the damn Mexicans there. They cooking our food.
Sarnetta.
Everybody could come in our community, Jabari, and make a living.
Yes.
I'm talking about money.
Yeah.
What we making is just means to pay our debt.
Listen, let me even talk specifically about where we are right now.
Yes.
I have lived in this house for 17 years, right? Going on 18 years. And there is a Chinese food store around the corner. Do you know that I have noticed that there are 3 generations, 3 families? So one of them makes enough money to move and do other things, and they sell it to another Chinese family who's trying to get their footing. That has happened 3 times since I've been here. 3. On the corner here, we have people from Yemen that have the store over here. This is what happens. And so we have to now be better and be stronger. So let's move. Let's get back directly to the topic. So those are the 7 topics in this 3-part series. By the way, who is the statue of? Do you know who the statue is of on the side here, Sa?
Nat Turner?
Nope.
Oh.
I'm going to show you in a minute.
Okay.
I'm going to show you in a minute. I'm not going to even play that. Let me show it to you in a minute. So, here's the first issue. What was the transatlantic slave trade? Well, first of all, understand that the transatlantic slave trade is a title that I take issue with. I don't like the term slave. Why do I bristle against the term slave? There's a very clear reason. First of all, when you say someone is a slave, what happens is a slave is someone that becomes stateless. A slave is someone that becomes that everything about them is the fact that they are enslaved. We know nothing else about them. You're just a slave. But if you use the word enslaved, which is actually an action word, the question that must come up when you say someone is enslaved is, well, who did that to them? See, if you say someone's a slave, they're a slave because they're a slave because they're a slave. But if you say enslaved, then you have to say, well, who did that? And then enslaved is now an adjective instead of a noun. So you have to ask enslaved what? So when you say enslaved African, it explains the fact that we are people that have a nation, that have a culture, that have a history, and that someone did something inhumane to us. That is the reason why I will always use the transatlantic enslavement trade. So you'll hear me say enslaved. Family, we need to alter the words that we use. Keep in mind that the word slave comes from Slav. Why? Because there were people in Eastern Europe who were abused. Now, the things that happened to us during our enslavement were not the things that happened to the Slavic people. But the term is even misappropriated for its ethnic usage. So we have to now revisit the term and try to come to a better understanding on how to describe it. So the transatlantic enslavement trade was essentially the forced trafficking of Africans by the Tamhu, by Europeans, in collaboration with warring African nations. We're going to talk much more about that as we move forward. But you must understand that these Tamhu took advantage of the internecine, the disagreements we had from one group to another group. Is that not what we're doing now? Can you actually argue with African nations who sold off, by the way, not to great benefit, but who sold off people from other groups? When you are arguing and banging on each other based on the groups that you have created here in the United States? Let's keep going. Let's keep moving. Approximately 12 million Africans were forced into coerced labor, primarily in the area of the Americas. And I say primarily because there were enslaved Africans who went to China. There were enslaved Africans that went to India. But and also, of course, there were enslaved Africans that went to Europe, to that area where the Tamhus come from. But most of us went to the Americas. In fact, now there's some debate on this, but what nation has the largest population of Africans in the Western Hemisphere, Saad? Do you know? What nation has the largest population of Africans in the Western Hemisphere? Brazil.
Yes, I know.
There are more Africans in Brazil than in the United States. Now, I'm going to tell you that we used to say that Brazil had the largest number of Africans outside of the continent of Africa. But my good friend and elder historian, Ronoko Rashidi, says perhaps we should be putting the Africans who are in India in the mix. So that's something that I think should be part of the conversation. Now, recognize that when we say approximately 12 million, that is an approximation. There's some people who believe that as many as 15 or even 17 million were taken and ended up in the Americas. The estimates of Africans who died in the Middle Passage, that is that journey from being kidnapped on the continent all the way to being transported to these new places where they would be enslaved are very difficult to tell. There's some people who say that there were around 4 million people who died, and there are others that say that in that entire event, there are probably somewhere close to 100 million who perished. Why the great difference in that number? Well, some people even look to a place like the Congo. And we see that the Belgians were actually in control of the Congo. A man named King Leopold was in control. And it was so brutal there that they regularly chopped off arms and legs and killed Africans in that Central West African country. There's some people who argue the estimate of the people who were killed in the Congo was 10 million. Far more than the people who died in what people classically call the Middle Passage. So there's some people who say that we are looking at the Middle Passage as something that is too static, and we have to understand that the enslavement, those people who died in process, that number is much larger. Okay. By the way, the source of that is from a great website called Digital History. You should take a look at it. The transatlantic enslavement trade began with the Portuguese. Some people don't recognize that. And it seems that they began this process somewhere around in the 1480s. You should know that Christopher Columbus, who was working with the Portuguese, actually was already familiar with the enslavement of Africans before he came to the New World. In fact, one of the reasons why he came back to the West, one of the reasons why he returned for his second voyage is because the native people seems to have told them that there were black men with spears that were tipped in gold that came before him. And so he had already seen Africans being subjugated to enslavement on the coast of West Africa. So he wanted to see that how these Africans could have made the journey before him. That's one of the reasons why Christopher Columbus made his second voyage. By the way, that is in his journal. So you can read that from himself. The transatlantic enslavement trade continued until the mid to late 1800s. And this system destroyed economies, families, nations. It occurred mostly on the coast of Africa, and it displaced millions of people to other countries. You should also understand that when we say transatlantic, sometimes we call it the triangular enslavement trade. So take a look at this, Sonetta. These just come from Wikipedia, but I think that they're really well done. And so I'm using them. Take a look at the fact that this trade often was triangular. We need to understand the triangular trade, because if we understand it, we'll understand that we are still party to it. We're still party to it. Can I ask you a question? How many Africans own rum? How many Africans own the means, the process to create alcohol, liquors? Well, often those things, those crops are cultivated in places where Europeans have no access to unless they have control of your homeland. So as they grow, for example, something that allows them to make rum, they take the raw materials from areas where you come from, process it, and then sell it back to you. And you in the club getting drunk when you don't understand that you're still in the process of a triangular trade. That these are still things that they got control of as they took you as an enslaved person. So understand that the triangular trade still occurs. So one of the triangles usually takes enslaved people to the Americas, sugar, tobacco, and cotton to Europe from the Americas, and then textiles, rum, and manufactured goods back to Africa. And so that was one of the triangles. There's another triangle that is often described where enslaved people were taken to the Americas once again. And then if we're talking about more of the tropical area, then we'd say that sugar comes to New England and then rum and goods go back to the continent of Africa. So this is a triangular trade. There are more people involved, more nations involved. And you need to understand that just as you think that people can wash or launder money today, this is kind of what they were doing then. One of the reasons why the cry from our African ancestors against enslavement didn't occur is because this triangular nature obscures the human cost in some ways. If you're just trading rum, then what exactly is happening to those people who you're selling? More on that in a future lesson. And here goes a really good graph that shows the number of slaves. This graph says imported. I don't like the term imported. It sounds like we're a product. It should say kidnapped. But you'll see how it starts in the late 1400s, begins to really take off in the 1500s. There's a place where it peaks around the mid 1700s into the mid 1800s, and then it has a decline in the late 1800s. This is really so you can see the numbers of Africans that were kidnapped and taken to other places. Here's number 2. And this is the one that deals with Kanye. And this part is where we'll end for today. This second issue is, why didn't we fight? Was slavery a choice? And I want you to understand that Africans are notoriously rebellious and resilient.
But we did fight, though.
I'm getting into it.
Okay.
This is I'm gonna
250 rebellions.
Yes.
And resurrections.
Yes.
More than that. That's
yes.
not even counted.
Yes. We getting in
people that we don't even know that was way greater than that.
That's right.
But we only know Nat Turner because that's the one
that's right.
And everybody talks about.
Well, that's the one. That's the one that might have been closest to where we live.
Right.
So I'm going to give you the names of other Africans who are actually insurrectionists. Mm-hmm. That's what we're going to do. So this is the question. Why didn't we fight? Was slavery a choice? Let's deal with this issue. You should understand that Africans are notorious, rebellious, and resilient. We fought on the continent. We fought on the ships. And we fought in the New World. We fought and fought and fought and fought. And when we couldn't take up arms, there were people that would learn how to grind glass so fine, in such a fine manner, that they could slowly poison their enslaver.
That's right.
Because if you eat ground glass, usually you're gone right away, right? Mm-hmm. And if you end up eating some of that food, some of those people that eat it would be gone right away. Well, do you know that we became so expert at grinding glass that even if you got a little bit of it, you wouldn't die? There are African women that became so expert on grinding it that they could slowly poison their enslaver. We're not going to even know how many Africans poisoned those people that were doing this to us. Mm-hmm. Do you know that sometimes they say that Africans are lazy? Do you know that's a form of resistance? Because if you get your enslaver to believe that you're lazy, and they say, well, they're lazy, they're not going to work as hard because they're lazy. This is a form of resistance. Mm-hmm. Being lazy was a political act. When you could not go upside the head of somebody, when you could not kill your enslaver, we resorted to a myriad of techniques to fight our enslavement. A myriad. Let's go further. Here are some instances on the continent. How many of you are familiar with Queen Nzinga?
All right.
Nzinga is a really, really sometimes controversial character, and she's born at around 1583 and dies around 1663. Her name was probably Njinga Mbande. But one of the things that she does, she's a very powerful tactician, and she has to make some really difficult decisions. She actually has both the Portuguese and the Dutch. And as they're fighting her, she has to decide how she's going to pit them against each other, how she's going to agree with one group while disagreeing with another, and then switch those terms, how she's going to actually manipulate the whole situation to save her people. She was a shrewd tactician. She did some things that were absolutely amazing. Now, there's some people who say, well, she had some involvement in enslavement. And this is probably true. It is possible that she actually did have some role in enslavement. But you have to understand that what Nzinga was doing is she was always making a calculation. How can I manipulate this situation to save my nation? It is believed that she actually was ousted from one nation. They said she had been murdered. She fled to another nation, rose to power there, and came back in control of both nations. This sister was bad. She even converts to Catholicism. And today, many scholars believe that obviously she did that, not because she believed in Catholicism, but because this was a way for her to take leverage against these European powers who were fighting each other. She is a very, very powerful lady. And one of the things I thought was so interesting is that when she's negotiating with the Portuguese at one point, she actually comes to a room and the Portuguese get to the location where they're negotiating before her entourage arrives. And they decide that a way to actually cause her stress, a way for them to show her dismay of Nzinga.
Now, Jabari, I'm surprised I didn't hear you say one of the most important things about Queen Nzinga.
I'm not finished talking about Nzinga.
That is, she led a group of women to fight against the enemy, and the black man at that time didn't want to get up and fight. And she told them, when we come back, you will not be allowed to come sleep with us, brother. Now, go and do that research. That's in the books.
Nzinga did many powerful things.
Yes.
This is one story. Have you seen this image before?
Yes.
Nzinga actually, when she went to negotiate with the Portuguese, they got there early and they made sure that there were only seats for them in the room. Because they wanted to show her that they were comfortable and they were powerful. They can control the terms of the negotiation.
Wow.
So Nzinga approaches them. She looks to see that there's no chair, and she motions to her servants. And a servant comes and bends over so that she can sit on them for the entire meeting. She wanted to say, you are not truly powerful. I am powerful. So she was a really brilliant tactical master. And we have to study the things that she did. She had to get her hands dirty. Nzinga got her hands dirty many times. She leads an army. She leads an army of men and women at different times.
Now, where was she from?
She is from the Mbande people.
The Mbande.
Mbande people.
Okay.
So we're seeing some really powerful work from one of our powerful sisters. One of her titles was Ndogo. And the Portuguese didn't understand the title.
Why is this important?
Listen.
Real quick.
Yeah.
Why is this important?
Why?
Because we hear our Hebrew brothers all the time say the woman's job is not to stand up and fight. We got to stand up and fight. But when you are in battle, it's the queen and the king. Queen Nzinga led an army of sisters, brother. That's why I remember that story to the heart. And
you know what the challenge is? People don't understand African history, nor do they view themselves as Africans, because we see many instances where African women actually led armies, led states, and were some of the fiercest fighters. You know, you could even talk about the Dahomey Mino. The Dahomey Mino were actually, of course, Sojourner too, but I'm talking about some of that actually warriors.
Right. Okay.
It is believed that the group of female soldiers in the movie Black Panther were actually based on the Dahomey Mino. The Dahomey Mino, sometimes they're called the Dahomey Amazons, actually were an elite group of soldiers. Dong Se He Bei, I think, is one of their greatest leaders, and they used muskets. They were excellent hand-to-hand fighters. They had spiritual significance too. They were sometimes called the lovely mothers. So there are lots of stories of women who had to fight. Now listen, do I want my queen to have to get down and fight physically? No.
Right.
But I better understand that she can. And in fact, we shouldn't say that our sisters can't fight because we're telling them they can't fight. We should allow them not to fight because they understand how important we view they are. See, people have gotten it twisted. They've actually thought that we're telling them what they can do. Now, brothers, if you have ever been with an African woman who has literally tens of thousands of years or more of leadership and of power, it is really hard to try to control an African woman. It is a futile a project because the history of leadership of African women is so long that she remembers it in her DNA. So we see Nzinga, she continues to fight these people, and she does amazing things. But what I was saying, wait.
I'm getting ready to go off.
Well, let me say this really quickly because I didn't finish this story. The Ndongo, they didn't understand her title, so they end up calling the land that she came from Angola. So we say today she's from Angola, but that is just a Tomhu misrepresentation of her title. She was from the Mbande people.
All right, real quick, let the people know because my phone gonna die.
Yes.
July the 7th.
Listen.
When and where?
July the 7th, you know that we're going to the Sa Netter TV Awards at Symphony Space. 4 p.m. Saturday, July 7th. Don't miss it. Don't miss it. If you miss it, you're going to regret it. And I'm going to be there, so look, I'm not going to miss it. So just remember that you need to be there.
All right.
So, another person who fought on the continent was known as King Jaja Opobo. How many of you are familiar with King Jaja Mpobo? We often say that Africans sold us, but you should understand that Jaja of the Mpobo people, who lives in the late 1800s, in the late 19th century, actually is a merchant priest, and he is sold into bondage. He's not a slave in the sense that is used in the Western world. It's almost more like being an indentured servant, but trust me, it was not pleasant. And so when he finds his way into purchasing himself into full freedom, he actually makes the argument that no African should be involved in what happens when Europeans come, when the Tomhu come to enslave their people. And so he first has an agreement with the Bani people of Nigeria. And then finally, because they still are involved, he decides that he's going to splinter off and create his own nation. And this is the Opobo people. He fights diligently in Nigeria. The British come and say they're claiming Nigeria. He refuses to pay them tribute. And he's actually kidnapped and taken to Europe, where he continues to fight against enslavement. Why have you not heard his story about a native African, a king, who speaks against enslavement? He actually meets with the queen and talks about the horrors of enslavement. He's one of the reasons why the system comes to an end later. So I want you to understand that this is an important person that we don't know. In fact, when the European nations, when the Tomhu nations meet at the Berlin Conference in 1884, they meet there, this is sometimes called the Scramble for Africa, to divide Africa into places that they can control. And he fights against that as well. He's a very, very powerful man. He is eventually allowed to return home, and on the voyage he is probably poisoned and dies. He fought for his people, he died for his people. And part of his battle is one of the reasons why enslavement comes to an end. So you should remember the name of King Jaja Opobo. We fought on board ships. You've heard about the Amistad. But have you heard about the ship that was leaving from Connecticut in 1764 under the leadership of Captain George Faggot? That was his name. The Africans took over the ship and killed every single last one of them and disappeared. We don't even know what happened to the Africans that were on the ship, but we know that they killed every single one of the Tomhu. There are many stories like this.
Yeah, I read that story.
Africans fought on the continent, on the ships. How about on the land? You should know that there were many revolts of enslaved Africans. We only know Nat Turner and Cerner, and some of you know about Gabriel Prosser, and Denmark Vesey, but most people don't even know Denmark Vesey. Sa Netter know Denmark Vesey because he's been doing this for a long time and studying for a long time. But most people don't know the name. Listen, there's Nat Turner, Gabriel Prosser, Denmark Vesey.
Don't forget Dessalines.
Well, Dessalines is in Haiti. I'm talking about in the United States first.
He was the ferocious.
So let's keep going. How many of you have heard of Nanny of Jamaica? Leads a revolt. How many of you heard of Daddy Sharp? Samuel Sharp in Jamaica leads one of the most brutal campaigns. He takes control of Jamaica for over a week. until finally major military. By the way, this is King Jaja Opobo. I should have led that forward. And here's an article about these rebellious enslaved Africans that was written by Henry Louis Gates Jr. Now, listen, I'm very critical of his work, but there are some things that he's done that I think are pretty good, and this is one of those things.
Hear this before my phone go out.
Yes,
brother, that's in the
chat room,
Instagram.
Yes,
says, I wanted to know if Brother Jabari knew Kemet settled on an already built ancient ruin.
The entire nation built on an ancient ruins?
Yeah.
I'm not sure what he's referring to.
Tank, he's not sure what you're talking
about. Now, you have to understand, that's like saying the United States. That's like saying that the United States, yeah, I see that, but I mean that's like saying an entire nation is on top of the ruins.
Right.
That you know how many no, that doesn't. Now, were there old?
But then again, what he's probably saying that it was already something there a long time ago, and I could probably
we call that pre-dynastic.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, one of the oldest settlements occurs around the area of Nabda Playa. I mentioned it last night. We have to know about Nabda Playa. So that is not the topic of this debate. Let's talk about that. Shoot me an email and we'll talk about it. There are ancient ruins that were created by the Kemetic people. They weren't created by other people. They were created by the Kemetic people. But Kemet is a nation that comes into existence in 3200 BCE. Mm-hmm. So we usually call that Kemet as well because it's the same people.
Tank, what Jabari is showing right now is that we are versed in many topics. Jabari,
I teach a course. Yes.
He is a really historian, not just ancient Kemet.
This is what I've spent my life doing. I love history.
Yeah.
I love history, and I love the history of our people. So I want to talk to you more about what you're discussing, brother. And we'll go from there. So shoot me an email, send me a text, and we'll move. So let's keep moving, okay? So you've heard about Daddy Sharp. By the way, did you know that Daddy Sharp is on the $50 banknote in Jamaica?
Nah.
Now, you know what? I meant to actually go upstairs and find one because I was going to give my brother Sonetta a $50 banknote from Jamaica that has Samuel Daddy Sharp on it.
$50 bill?
It's a $50 banknote from Jamaica. I don't know. I would never use it because, I mean, it got Daddy Sharp on it. And I don't live in Jamaica. I don't have access to them like that. But it's a gift that I'm going to give to brother Sonetta to remind us of Africans who revolt. And of course, there's the 1804 Haitian Revolution, where we hear powerful Africans like Toussaint Louverture, like Boukman, like Dessalines, who are all part of this movement to free Africans from the shackles of the Tomhu. Particularly in that instance, it was from the French. But here's another thing that deals with the United States, since I believe most of our audience is here. We question whether Africans fought. But did you know, this is in Jabari's book, 7 Little White Lies, you should get a copy so we could talk about these issues. Did you know that the first Tomhu settlement in the United States, the first European settlement in the United States, was completely destroyed by rebellious Africans? Did you know that? Why don't we know the name of that settlement? Well, it was settled at around 1526 in the area that we would consider, it is in Georgia, what we would call Sapelo Island, Georgia today. And it was led by a quote-unquote explorer by the name of Luca Vasquez de Ayllon. Luca Vasquez de Ayllon, and it was called San Miguel de Guadalupe. San Miguel de Guadalupe. Want to sound smart when you're talking to your friends? Say, I bet y'all never even heard of San Miguel de Guadalupe. Because that's where rebellious Africans, that's where the dudes and the sisters that get it poppin' were. So what happened is this settlement was established by the Spanish. They had about 600 settlers. That's a lot of people, by the way, in the early United States. And they had about 100 enslaved Africans. And as soon as Luca Vasquez de Ayllon said that he was going to go back to their home to get supplies, by the time he got back, the entire settlement was razed. It is believed that those Africans went and lived with the native people and continued their story amongst the native people. So that entire settlement was destroyed. Now, if we say Africans didn't fight, we fought so much that the first time that the European had any success at creating a nation, it was destroyed. Do you hear what I'm saying? This is long before 1619 and Jamestown. That's how much your African ancestors fought. That's how serious we were. How many of you have heard about the Stono Rebellion in South Carolina? This is perhaps the largest revolt of enslaved Africans in all of the 13 colonies. It took place on September 9th, 1739, led by an enslaved African, a powerful enslaved African by the name of Jemmy. Not Jenny, Jemmy. And Jemmy led about 20 Africans to a week-long revolt that killed 25 people. And Sa, both you and I are native New Yorkers, right? Sometimes we think of the North and we don't think about the fact that the North is actually still slave territory. Did you know that New York threatened to secede with the South? Did you know that?
Nope.
That there was a period where the largest number of Africans outside of the South who were enslaved were in New York. And a large number of them were in New York City. So in 1741, something that was called the New York Conspiracy took place. Enslaved Africans convinced indentured Irish people, these are the poor whites, to unify with them. And what did they do? They quietly tried to burn down all of Manhattan. Now, how come you don't know that enslaved Africans and poor Tom who that unified with them tried to burn down all of Manhattan? There were 13 fires set.
Real quick.
Yes.
Your email.
It's jabariosaze@hotmail.com. Jabari. O, S as in Sam, A, Z as in Zoo, E as in Edward at hotmail.com. And you can also go to jabariosaze@hotmail.com. Osaze. O-S-A-Z-E. You can also go to any of the websites I have, centerforma'at.com or shrineofma'at.org, and you can reach me there. So go ahead, reach out so we can continue this dialogue. So as we conclude, I want you to know that Africans in New York also got in and also fought and also were working to destroy enslavement. So what happens when all of these Africans are constantly fighting, constantly killing the Tomhu enslavers, constantly doing small things like burning down buildings? Guess what they were doing? They were making this globally inhumane system called enslavement unviable. They made it so it became so expensive that the Tomhu had to think twice. That it might actually cost them their lives, their liberty, everything. And this is one of the reasons why enslavement begins to unravel. Because Africans never stop fighting. You can never stop us. That's what you're made of, family. That's your stock. And you know that in, and by the way, I should also say that when Africans escaped, they even sometimes created autonomous cities and villages. Sometimes we call them maroons, which comes from the Spanish word cimarron. Right. Sometimes they're called palenques. Mm-hmm. And sometimes they're also called maroons, palenques. I'm forgetting one term. Jabari Osaze is having a senior moment. It'll come back to me. And so
the seniors, man. You can't be dissing us, brother.
So there's another term that's escaping my mind. But understand that Quilombo. That's the Portuguese word. Because, the Portuguese started the transatlantic slave trade. There's a wonderful movie called Quilombo that deals with Africans fighting against enslavement and creating their nation.
Are you familiar with the Memphis Massacre? The Devil's Punch Bowl?
Woo!
Look them up. Are you familiar with that?
Yes, I am.
Somebody in the chat just...
Who was that in the chat?
Oh, man, they going in.
Woo!
He said a lot of us ain't familiar with a lot of them.
Wow. I haven't heard about those names since like college. Woo!
Yeah.
So, powerful.
You got to have a charger down here.
Yeah, you know what? It always goes back upstairs. I don't have one down here.
Damn.
So, listen, we'll come to a close, okay?
All right.
This is actually the marker for the Stono Rebellion in South Carolina, and you're actually seeing a painting that describes part of these great fires that Africans had done, these great fires that they set in New York, seeking to destroy all of Manhattan. The place where you and I both live, Africans fought and tried to destroy because they were enslaved. And I gotta end with this. One of the reasons why we don't understand how much we fought, how much we actually destroyed a system, is because the narrative that has been given to us is that enslavement was ended by good white folk. And this is a narrative, a trope that we continue to see. You know, you see those movies where there's all these black kids and one white person believes in them, and then they work and they get them to be who they're supposed to be. Movies like The Principal, movies like Dangerous. Oh, what is that one called? It had Michelle Pfeiffer. It had that movie. It had the song from Coolio in it. We continue to see these stories about how, you know, everything's bad, but there's one good white person that works. That's the kind of way that this story is told. And that's what we actually have begun to believe. So you're seeing a woodcut that shows a formerly enslaved African man with his family. Now look at his wife. His wife is like, what the heck? You kissing at Tom Who's hand?
Right.
That's what it looked like, don't it?
Look mean right.
She's like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
He's saying, I'm the man of the family, but this is really the man. And what is Abraham Lincoln saying here? You're giving me honor, but where does the honor go to? The glory is to God. So this is the way that they depict Abraham Lincoln, when in actuality, Abraham Lincoln made a political decision. He thought that enslavement was not moral, but he had already said that if it was going to save the Union, he would keep it.
Right.
If it was going to save the Union, he would get rid of it. If it was to save the Union, he'd keep some and get rid of some. So he was about saving the United States, not about saving Africans. Africans fought the Civil War and ended it. There was a point where Abraham Lincoln and the North was losing the Civil War. And it's actually the head of a paper in New York, a man named Horace Greeley. There's a statue of him right by City Hall. Horace Greeley is a progressive, and he's an abolitionist. And he keeps saying to Lincoln, you're losing, and you're losing for the worst reason. The reason why you are losing is because you won't sign a proclamation emancipating all of the Africans. If you do that, the Africans will fight and destroy the system. They are the most powerful and rebellious people in the world. If you have them on your side, we'll win. And so Abraham Lincoln first says, no, he's not going to do it. And then finally, he loses a little bit more. And so then he signs a proclamation that says those enslaved people in certain states, the ones that are fighting us, will be freed. Now, there are some states that were not fighting with the South, that were allied with the North, that still had enslaved people. He didn't free them initially. Mm-hmm. This was only a strategic ploy. It isn't until later, with the signing of the Second Emancipation Proclamation, that they are freed. And so
that's the conclusion of class 1.
Wait,
go ahead.
I got to conclude here.
Like that.
Look, right here. Take a look at this. You got to see this man. And some of you who have looked at previous videos of me have seen him at least once before. But I have to continue to say his name. This is the most common image of an enslaved African. We see the welts on his back.
Told me his name, I forgot.
And that's the reason why I got to keep mentioning him, because everyone should know him. Mm-hmm. So we can see the horrors of enslavement. And we don't even know his name. We don't know what happened to him.
I know it started with a G.
You're correct.
I know.
But here's the deal. Here's the deal. Not only do we know his name, we know exactly what he did.
Gordon. Go
ahead, Sa. Gordon. So Gordon escapes a plantation in Louisiana. Mm-hmm. He travels about 40 miles at night within 10 days. Mm-hmm. Hiding. You know what he did when he left the plantation?
He went back.
He took onions with him.
Right.
So that as he was traveling and the dogs were after him, he could rub onions on him so he could escape.
Right, to kill the smell.
Nothing to eat. Onion to get him free.
Yeah, to kill him.
That's right. So the dogs couldn't follow him. Right. So he travels the whole way. When he gets to the Union lines at Baton Rouge, this is when they take this picture about the horrors of enslavement. It's printed in Harper's Weekly.
And he wanted to go back to preaching.
And as soon as he is allowed, guess what he does? He puts on a suit. He puts on a uniform, gets a gun, and goes back to the same place where he was enslaved to fight to free our people. Now, I don't know if Jabari has the kind of power and internal intestinal fortitude that I would have done this. I might have said, look at what happened to me. I hope that they win.
Right.
But that's not what Gordon did. Gordon said, I'm not free unless we're free. This is who you are. How could you be embarrassed of this, brother? If you knew his story and the story of so many others, why, you wouldn't be shying away from the story of your enslavement. You would be proclaiming it every day. You'd go to work and say, you know what, work sucks, but my people destroyed a global system with nothing. Look at what I have. Imagine what I could do. We need to be proud of the story of our enslavement and proud of how we destroyed this global system. Remember the story of Gordon. We should no longer say we should forget. We should be the one saying never forget.
Right.
Because we won't forget our greatness.
Think about
we won't forget our power. And so I want you to recognize that this is an important dialogue, an important conversation, and we need to share it with our people. This is a group of students who I've been working with for years. These are the students from the African Genesis Institute. Because Brother Jabari works with students. And the African Genesis Institute, which was created by a wonderful couple in Philadelphia, we've been working on this kind of information for a while, and they've done amazing things. We got to tell our youth the truth of our story. I really hope you enjoyed class 1, and I hope you're ready for class 2. Because I really believe that this conversation is as important as any dialogue that Africans can have. Peace, family. I'll speak to you soon.